What's up, YouTube? We have a pretty exciting one here today. So this is a Jhin deck profile, and basically I decided to play Jhin at Ascent Boston. We are recording this before Ascent Boston, just a few days before, so you guys can get the deck profile as soon after Ascent Boston as possible. And either it'll be really cool because I did really well with it, or this is just a casual deck profile because I scrubbed out of day one with it or something. We'll see. No idea how I'm gonna do. We'll talk a little bit about how I feel about Jhin's strength later on, but I'm going to start just talking about the mat deck because there's a lot to talk about. We're going to do a pretty deep dive video for this one. This is going to be content that's more similar that you might find on our Patreon videos usually, but we're actually giving it to everyone on YouTube this time. So let's jump into it. So first off, we have Spirit of Serene Fire. If you're a newer player, don't worry. This is not a card that you haven't seen before. This is just the FTC card. My wife just does really amazing altars, and I'm using a blinged out deck at Ascent Boston, so I wanted to use the altars that she made for me. So this is a typical card to be ran in Jhin. Getting the heal is really good. Jhin already has that immortality like heal basis in the deck, so it fits perfectly with him. But I'm actually also running Spirit of Fire. Again, just another custom. If you want to actually find videos of what these look like the process of making them, or more pictures of different altars on her Instagram, you can follow Textured Ear on Instagram or her YouTube channel where she'll make detailed videos about all the altars that she does. So, but Spirit of Fire is a inclusion that I didn't make until more testing of this deck. And I realized that when you're testing against a Ryle deck, you kind of just need the raw power that Spirit of Fire gives you. They're not doing a lot of early damage, so most likely you're not reliant on this heal from the Serene Fire. And so you just want more cards in your hand, and that's what Spirit of Fire is going to give you. So because Ryle and Creative now are upping the counts of cards that you can find immediately for a +1, it's not as important to get the glimpse either. Previously, glimpsing for a Creative Shock and stuff was really important, but now you have Creative Shock, Hasty Messenger if you're going second, Ryle the Abyss, and then Cremation Ritual plus Stalwart if you're going first, or Cremation Ritual plus Stalwart or Fluffy Shopkeep if you're going second. So there's so many good turn one openers. I think honestly with the Ryle package and creative and all that kind of stuff, I think we're starting to see the most consistent turn one openers for level 3 decks ever, especially if you build it with cremations and hasties and all that kind of stuff. And so you just don't need the glimpse as much anymore. So it's kind of like when you're playing against aggro, bring out Serene. When you're playing against non-aggro, you bring out just normal Spirit of Fire and try to get that raw power. Also, people have really only ever played Serene Jhin before, so there's a chance that you go Spirit of Fire, you draw 7, and later on in the game, your opponent's just literally thinking that you're Serene and playing around that heal even though you don't have it. Then obviously we have Jhin level 1, 2, and 3. So the level 1 and level 2 are pretty much useless. You do get some bonuses from it. The cards will be up on screen. I'm sure you can read them. But Jhin level 3 is the biggest thing, the reason to play the deck. As long as it is not your end phase, Jhin has immortality. That means that you cannot lose the game due to damage outside of your end phase. You can lose the game due to deck out. There are alternate win conditions, but most of the time when you lose a game of GA, it is due to damage, and it basically makes it so that on your opponent's turn, it's impossible to kill you, or even on your turn outside of the end phase, because that's very relevant as well. You basically get to have a combat phase. You get to have an attack with your champion on your turn, no matter what, even if you're at a huge amount of health, which is incredibly relevant for Jhin. So really cool champion design there. Then we have this very good Regalia card. So this is our main win condition, is swinging with this weapon, and we have a few ways to protect it in the deck because of how important it is. So this will give you better attacks, more damage based on the amount of damage that you have on your champion. So with Jhin, you actually want to get to a really high damage count on your champion. It's very different than any other Grand Archive champion. Because you won't die right away with the level 3 effects, and then all of your cards that do damage scale with damage on yourself. This will also draw you a card, deal yourself damage, because again, you kind of want to self-damage a little bit. So it's our main win condition with this card, and we'll talk about combos with it later. Berserker Plate is a really cool item. So this one is giving you 7 extra health, and you're a 28 health champion. So if you bring this out, you're a 35 health champion that can't die outside of your end phase. So that's pretty cool. So you can, if your opponents hit you up to like 42 health or something, you can just materialize Berserker Plate, and then Mend Flesh, which is a card I'll show later, heal down below that 35-point threshold during your turn. And then by the time that you move to end phase, you're no longer in that lethal range and you'll be safe. So it's very common for Jhin players to take an extraordinary amount of damage, hit their opponent for a pretty good chunk of damage, sometimes OTKing them, and then after that, heal. Now that you don't need the damage buffs for that turn anymore, heal and survive another turn and make it really hard for your opponent to win. So this is also every single turn giving you 3 self-damage, which is important sometimes, and more importantly, drawing you a card. So very, very strong. He has some of the strongest regalia in the game. We have a smoke bombs. We are an attack-based deck. This just makes sense to run. We also want some 1-cost floating memory cards that will draw us a card, because with the Ryle package and everything, we can get a pretty obscene amount of floating memory in the graveyard, even though we have our Exia regalia as well. Sometimes you just want that extra draw, and getting rid of an interceptor can be literally the difference between a win and a loss. Then we have Quicksilver Grail. This is more or less used mostly with Shuang, the weapon, because being able to, especially if you don't have a floating memory, which does happen pretty often, being able to bring out just QSG, put a Shuang underneath, and then go, okay, now I'm gonna do my Enrage, whatever, pay with QSG from my memory, get the draw off Shuang, and then add that to your hand. It can really let you do some turns that otherwise would be like really hard to do with the hand size that you have. So this can really help you manipulate your hand size on your lethal turn. Or you can also do some tricky things like put the Berserker Plate underneath this and then move to end phase, and your opponent tries to like fireball you or something like that, and you just go, okay, in response to fireball, I'm going to pop QSG and gain 7 health essentially, which is obviously a very, very neat trick. We have Chalice of Blood. This is literally built for Jhin, basically. You're very often going to be able to use this effect. It's the easiest effect ever for this deck. Chalice is a little hard to actually utilize in other decks. Serene Luxem is the deck that's been able to use it the most, but you're pretty much always going to get a chance to pop this. So yeah, Chalice just like works perfectly in this deck. Then we have Terrafring. Terrafring, I think, is going to be one of the most common regalia items used in Ascent Boston. Just from our testing and looking at tournament results and everything, Terrafring just seems to have a huge place in every single deck, and so it's no different for ours. Even though we do want damage, sometimes we need a little bit more time to build up resources and cards. So going Terrafring to slow down your opponent just a little bit until you build up enough hand size to go for the kill yourself is really important. And then our last card in here is actually a card that's honestly meant more for the sideboard, but I wanted to have 15 main deck cards in the sideboard, and so we put Spellword Scepter in the main. Some honorable mentions that I've been thinking about was Nullifying Lantern, Nullifying Mirror, even Censor if like you go first against a Ryle deck and you don't open a big float, but I found that the engine was consistent enough that I didn't really need Censor. And also maybe a secondary sword, either Huaji or Sword of Seeking, because you will get the True Sight from Sword of Seeking, which is really nice because you can still build up a really big attack just with Enrages, not with your other weapon, and use a Sword of Seeking to push through things like Vanish from Sight and stuff, which I believe stealth enablers might be a little popular at Boston. So I think Sword of Seeking was the next card I would have ran, but I really just didn't want to put this in the side. I wanted to fit it into the main and give myself more sideboard space. So the best combo with this is either using it on an Enrage when you're playing against an in-cap deck to enable you actually being able to get to enough damage. But the actual like reason that it's in the deck is using this with Regal Inquisition. If you bring out Spellword Scepter, it comes in hindered. On a future turn, it's awake. You go to level 3, whatever. You pop Spellword Scepter. You play Regal Inquisition. There's kind of nothing they can do. You just get to look at their hand in memory. They can respond by playing cards in response to the Regal, but that means that they're probably playing them at suboptimal times for themselves and everything. And using that can be a really, really big thing against like level 3 strategy decks, but also just against any deck to make sure that they don't have like a Crystallized Destiny or some way to live against your damage if you don't have like the in-cap backup or something. So this plus Regal Inquisition is just a really, really good tool, and works really well in this deck. All right, so part of this I'm going to fly by, and then the other part we will deep dive into. So we are running the Rile of the Abyss package. You're going to be watching this deck profile after Ascent Boston, so I'm not really going to explain this too much. This is a great value engine. These are all value cards. This is going to let you filter through your deck. We are on 4 Evercurrent Raider. I know that some people are a little split on the Rile package, whether or not they run these 12 or these 16, or even like 2 Evercurrent or something like that. We've definitely been seeing a lot of decks have success with any amount of these Water Spectre floating memory cards, but for us, we just wanted to prioritize being able to get as much influence as possible. That just makes sense for this Jin list, and it was easy enough to make the deck space to fit all of that value. Basically, with Jin, we really only wanted to worry about mainly value and then a little bit of survivability, and then of course our damage pieces, but we don't have to run too many of those, fortunately. Going along with more value cards, though, we do have 4 Creative Shock. Again, like I said earlier, being able to run Creative and Rile. This is nothing new. You're going to see a lot of decks from Ascent Boston run all of this engine. Where it does get tricky, though, is Fast Cure. So Fast Cure is a card that I personally believe is a little hit or miss right now. The reason that I'm on Fast Cure is because I do go Serene some games, and I just really wanted a little bit of extra floating memory to discard off of Creative. I found myself doing blind creatives pretty often, and what that means is that I had to put down my entire hand to play Creative, and I was drawing 2 off the top and discarding 1 there. And doing that means that you're a lot less control of what you discard, obviously. And so having a higher float count for that was nice, because I found myself, after I put the Fast Cures in, I'd cut some other cards, actually being able to get a lot more value when I did plays like that and such. So also, like, we have Hasty Messenger and stuff in here. We have a lot of discard effects. And so I just wanted a little bit more floating memory. You're not going to get the effect probably too often, but Fast Cure is good, especially in Jin, because being able to fast recover can be really relevant. You can attempt a small lethal poke or something, or just like damage with your champion once you're at like this high damage counter. And then if you kill your opponent, awesome, you win the game. If not, you can just say, okay, you had the answer, you had the Crystallized Destiny or something, but I didn't go all in, I didn't put my whole hand down, so I'm gonna do Fast Cures and Mend Flesh and all this kind of stuff, and try to move to my end phase and heal out of my lethal range. So Fast Cures is especially good in Jin, I think. This is one that, like I said, I'm recording this before Boston. I could see my actual Boston list maybe have cutting one of these, or maybe even adding in 1 extra. This is the only count in the main deck that I feel maybe a little hesitant on. So definitely we'll try to link what I actually played in Boston. It should be nearly this exact identical list. I don't think I'm going to be making any changes, but that is one that I think I could see. Then we're running 4 Stalwart Shield Knight. Again, same reasons for Fast Cure. We run Creatives and Hasties. We want more floating memory to discard, because when you have like Creative and then like one of the Spectre floating memories in your hand, it's really awkward, because you don't really want to discard that with Creative, because you're hoping to draw into a Rile of the Abyss and get more value off that, because Rile can only discard Spectre floating memory cards. I should say, Rile can only discard Spectre cards. The only Spectre cards that we're running in this list are Rile cards or Liminal Guide and Floating Memory cards. So, yeah, like we just want these generic floating memory cards, so that way when we open up our hand and we see Creative, Liminal Guide, and Stalwart Shield Knight, we're going to play the Creative and discard the Stalwart Shield Knight, hopefully draw into Rile cards, and then use Rile to discard Liminal Guide and get better value there. Again, a lot of this Jin deck is just really built around playing for value, and that's kind of why I'm bringing it to Boston. You know, people that are familiar with my playstyle and everything know that I love value. I love drawing cards. Jin's been a big favorite of mine for a while. I've been playing it at locals for a long time now, and I think that this is one of the few metas where he could actually have a shot at making it pretty deep into a tournament. I don't really expect to top 8 or win this event. I'm hoping for a day 2. Personally, I've been practicing less and stuff. You can hear about that on our podcast, so I won't be going too much into there. But I do think that he has an actual shot right now. I wouldn't say that this is the deck that I think is the best deck to bring to Boston or anything. And the tournament's over anyways, so you guys don't care about that. We'll see what the results did. Hopefully, I at least made day 2, and I'm not embarrassing myself with this deck profile. Up next, we have 3 Cremation Ritual. I'm shocked that Rile decks aren't playing this. this is an insane card to have in a Ryle deck. So obviously you have the classic openings of you go first, you draw 7, you play Stalwart Stalwart Cremate, and then you start with a floating memory in your graveyard and the same amount of cards in hand, since Cremate plus Stalwart is 2 cards out of your hand, but Cremate draws you 2 cards, and now that Stalwart's in the grave to use for floating. So it's a really easy way to +1 on first turn, similar to Creative and Ryle. There's just so many ways to +1 in this deck. But also, Liminal Guide is, I guess we can talk about this just a little bit, since I kind of skipped over him earlier. So Liminal Guide is not a floating memory card, but it is a +1. So if you discard this with something like Ryle or Creative or Hasty or whatever, and then you level up, you can bring Liminal Guide back to the field. It'll draw a card. So if you discarded it off a card that already went even, like Ryle or Creative, that is a +1. And then now you have a 1/3 unit on board. Which is really relevant because that 3 health is a lot to clear off. So it's either good defense. If they spend their attacks hitting into it, that means that they're not hitting into you. It's going to give you more time to value build and get to Berserker's play and draw a bunch of cards and just go for this OTK later on in the game after you self-damaged. So either they sink damage into it, which is great, or it sticks on board and you're chipping them for 1 every single time, which is actually very relevant for this deck. Or you got a free unit on board. You got a free ally on board. Now you can just Cremate Ritual. So now you already +1 with the Liminal Guide from what you discarded it with. And then now you're playing Cremation Ritual and you're not actually sacrificing something that costs you resources to put onto the field. So it just turns your Cremation Rituals into the easiest +1 that Cremation Ritual has ever seen. So it's a really, really good combo there. We aren't on 4 just because it can be a little clunky, and especially because of how popular aggro is. If aggro wasn't more popular, I think I'd probably be on 4. But a lot of times you're going to want to keep your fluffies and your stalwarts on board, and sometimes even your liminals, like the 1 damage can matter to clear off items and stuff, clear off allies and stuff. So because of how popular aggro is, we're on 3 Cremation, but if we were in a purely level 3 format, we'd probably be on 4. Then we have 2 Hasties. This is another one that I've experimented with the counts of a lot. I was on 4 at one point. I just felt like I never wanted to play it. I was drawing it too often and stuff. 2 is maybe too little, but, you know, especially with like adding in the Fastgears and stuff. This and Fastgears, these are the only counts that I feel like a little hesitant on. Everything else feels correct to me. So again, just check out the deck list that's linked in the description to see my actual Boston list. It might have that as a small change, maybe some sideboard changes. Everything else though, material deck and main deck outside of Hasty and Fastgears feel very, very, very solid. All right, so we have Fluffy Shopkeep. So this card is crazy. I think this is one of the most underrated cards in DTR, to be honest. Really great in Onsole, but it actually is okay in our deck too. So it being a 1/3 interceptor that replaces itself is really big. It keeps our value the same, and it gives a really good defensive option. So it's like a Stalwart Shieldmate that costs 1 more, but has 1 more health and doesn't get turned off by Censor or getting eaten from Merlin or something like that. So you're basically almost always going to get that draw. The reason that we're only on 2 and not more is because there's not enough cards in our material deck that we want to get rid of. You can very comfortably play 1 of these in a game because we are on that dual spirit, and this is one of the things that actually led me to the dual spirit decision as well. So you will only be able to play 1 of these spirits, right? And so if you play Spirit of Fire and then turn 1 even, you play Fluffy Shopkeep, you can say, this is an unplayable card in my mat deck, so I can easily get rid of it, right? And then now you only have to get rid of 1 other card in your mat deck. And if you know your matchup, it's going to be a very easy decision. If you don't, you're usually just getting rid of Spellword Scepter because it's only really good against like certain level 3 decks like Luxem and stuff like that. But also like I said earlier when I was talking about Spellword Scepter, it's mainly in here for like kind of the post side games when you bring in more Regals, because we're only on 1 Regal in the main. So getting rid of these 2 immediately with Fluffy Shopkeep, if you don't know what you're playing against, is a very easy decision. But even if you play that second one, at that point, you'll probably know what you're playing against. And so you can make a more informed decision of being like, okay, I know my opponent doesn't have Taunters and Interceptors. I'm going to get rid of Smoke Bombs. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're a combo. Maybe you're playing against Rye or some deck that's not really attacking very often. Or you're playing against, Seal that he's swinging with this champion, but he has a huge influence. So like Terraforming's not really going to bother him and stuff, right? Like you can get rid of like Smoke Bombs, Terraforming. You can get rid of QSG because it's really only in here to help with like lethal turns with strong, but if you're getting a lot of floating memory, it doesn't really matter. So like it's very flexible. The second fluffy SHOPKEEP is a much harder one to play for sure, but there are enough options in here to get rid of that still are like relevant. It's probably going to be one of these three. Because you can usually use this in every game, and then these two are just so strong, it's like nearly impossible to want to get rid of one of those, and then obviously you need your champions to win. So the second fluffy is definitely a lot harder, but your first fluffy is a very easy decision, and the second one is possible. So I'm running two because I really want to see one of these against aggro especially, but even against a Ryle deck, like being able to play this and then like cremate it and such, you know, like it's just getting you a ton of value and stopping that chip damage so that you don't get like Rending really early from like an Onsel deck or something like that. So Fluffy just like provides a lot of value and defense at the same time in this deck, and it's just a really good underrated card right now. Then we have 4 Dungeon Guide. We pretty much want to rush to level 3. Our materializations are just so strong in this deck with both the plate and the polearm weapon. And so, you know, turboing to 3 and then bringing out the plate and then getting that draw just right away, starting that self-damage right away, because now you're immortal already. You don't have to worry about dying early to an aggro deck or something. You have that immortality. You want to just start building up resources as soon as you get there. I mean, you want to be building up resources the entire game, but yeah, Dungeon Guide's just like really good. I know that some level 3 decks only run 3, but we want to run 4 Dungeon Guides because we want to get there ASAP. We are on 2 Reduce to Ash and 1 Spurn to Ash. So this might look like kind of a weird split to some players. We are a Ryle deck, so Censor is going to be one of the most... I would argue that Censor is probably going to be the most played Regalia card in Boston. Now, the only thing is a lot of aggro decks are playing Ryle themselves, so maybe they're not playing Censor, but you definitely, if you are bringing Ryle the Abyss level 3 deck, you want to be prepped for some Censor removal. So this is essentially all Censor removal. Spurn can hit Censor, it's just at slow speed. Reduce can hit it at fast speed, which is obviously better, especially if you do something like draw pass with 7, your opponent brings out, or I guess like 8, because you're going second, your opponent brings out Censor as their first materialization. You just go, cool, yeah, in your end phase, Ryle, do that, and then you're going to have drawn enough cards that you can follow it up with a Censor, or sorry, follow it up with a Reduce to blow up the Censor and just immediately go into your game plan, and it's barely an inconvenience to you. Honestly, it's probably better for you that they spent your materialization and you just had to lose 1 card from hand for that. So yeah, very important cards. The Reduce is nice at that fast speed, like I said, for that in specific interaction. But Spurn is actually fairly relevant right now, I think. So I don't believe that I'm the only person that's going to be bringing Jhin to Boston. I have a feeling that there's going to be some other notable players bringing this, and you know, like Jhin's a fan favorite. There's definitely going to be just an assortment of people bringing this, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's multiple Jhins in day 2 even. And so Spurn to Ash is really good for that matchup because, like I said, your plate and your polearm weapon Regalia are so powerful, but they're 1 cost, so you can't hit them with Reduce. So playing Spurn to get rid of Jhin stuff, there's a Wind Ranger boot deck that is like really strong and powerful. If they bring out their boots, it's a 1 cost. They kind of have to bring it out early, so you'll get a turn to Spurn it. If you just Spurn that, it takes away their OTK potential, and you're just going to win the game on the spot pretty much. There's a couple of other relevant items as well. Polaris, you can stop the Polaris because a lot of people aren't thinking it's going to be destroyed now that it's a 1 cost because of the errata. Reduce can't hit it, Unbroken Mustang can't hit it, Farukun Acolyte can't hit it, and those are some of the most popular Regalia removal pieces right now. And so they might just bring out Polaris like tapped and think it's safe, and then you hit it with a Spurn, and now you've slowed their deck down so much. And it's actually really important in that matchup because now they can't, in your end phase, glimpse a ton and just do a bunch of Cosmic Bolts to you and kill you while you don't have that immortality. So Spurn has a lot of play right now. Reduce is way better at dealing with Censor, and that is the main reason that I am playing these. So that's why it's a 2-1 split, but we do run more copies of each one of these in the sideboard. Then we have 3 end caps. So this is a count that I have messed around with a lot in Jhin, and normally I've only ran 2, but the more and more I played it, I really wanted to go to 3. So This is really good against Rile decks. If you did draw 7 Spirit and then, your opponent tries to do a Rile, you can just incap it and you might just brick their hand right there. And then on your next turn, because this is a very expensive card to play, 4 cost. It's always 4 cost in this deck. We'll never get the class bonus. So it's very expensive. But then, like, your next turn, you get to do your Rile and filter and do all this kind of stuff. And they just might have, like, Spectre cards in their hand that are rotting there because they weren't able to discard and filter with Rile. So Incap's really good for the Rile matchup just for Rile alone, but also, like, stopping Floodgates, stopping Crystallized Destiny, stopping Song of Frost, all these cards that are going to try to stop you from winning the game. It can be really important to hold up an Incap in that late game to play on your turn that you're going for lethal. It just has, like, a lot of utility in this deck. Having a negate is very important. Action negates are some of the only things that you care about, because you don't really care about attack negates, because you're okay most of the time if people are attacking you, because you kind of want that damage on you. And again, ally negates aren't that important either, because again, most of those are just like attacking you, or they're interceptors or taunts, which you already have answers to in the deck. So really all you need in this deck is action card negates. So Incap just fits perfectly. I know that there was a Serene Jhin list that looked fairly similar to this list, actually, because I had immediately, when I saw that Serene Jhin list got 9th place, I think, at one of the big regionals, the weekend or 2 weekends before Boston, I immediately laid out my deck and started comparing and wanted to see, did I miss anything? And they were on null spells. I just personally, we've talked about it on our podcast, I don't get the effectiveness of that card. I think Incap is where you want to be in a Serene Jhin list. But yeah, so this card's just great. And then also we're running an Exia card that's going to help with how much this costs. So I'll get to that in a second. Okay. We're basically at our advanced element cards. So this next one isn't an advanced element card, but you're only ever playing it when you are level 3. Rending Flames. So you do get the class bonus on here to double damage, and this card is phenomenal. This card is unreal in Onsol, it's unreal in Philo, but it's also unreal in Jhin, because you don't need to get all your enrages. You don't need to have this, like, massive influence. If you can just, like, if your opponent's rushing you down and you just kind of, like, skate by to level 3, materialize QSG, put the polearm weapon underneath it, Dungeon Guide up, play Rending Flames on the attack, banish the Shuang, and then now let's say that polearm weapon has like 7 damage on it, which is not unrealistic. Then now you're getting the 3 from Rending Flames, and now you're doing like 20 damage in one swing. It's just a phenomenal card. It's a great finisher. You want a couple of attack cards in this deck because we are only on 1 weapon in the material deck. We're not running the Sword of Seeking or the Huaji, and so we need a couple attack cards to pair with Enrage if we don't have a weapon to swing with Enrage. And this was just one of the perfect fits. I know that some people have been playing like Blazing Legend stuff. Blazing Legend is definitely a good option, and it's one that I did consider, but I would rather be playing Regals and Incaps to deal with damage prevention, and give myself an option for damage that is just better scalability. So Rending alone can just obliterate a champion. You can very easily do 30 damage with this card. And so yeah, this just a fantastic attack card in Jhin. Then we have 1 single copy of Regal Inquisition. So I'll talk about this card more when we go to the sideboard, because I have 3 more copies in there. It's nice as a 1-of in the main because we're already maining that Spellword Scepter. So if you do draw it, you can materialize Spellword and have a use for it in game 1. So that's honestly kind of the reason that I'm playing 1 in the main. I think if I was siding Spellword, I'd probably side this card, but I'm kind of wanting to get a little bit of value of maining the Spellword, which is kind of like bad deck decision process, honestly. I'm kind of like playing this card even though it's suboptimal because I'm like making another kind of suboptimal choice. But it kind of makes sense to me, so I'm just rolling with it. This can be really good even if you're not using it with Scepter, just to bait out an Incap so that your Enrages don't get Incapped, or if they don't have a negate for it, you get that full knowledge. So Jhin can be a little tricky to interact with. If you just play Regal and you get full knowledge of their hand, you might say, sweet, they don't have any way to interact with me. I'm just going to kill you instead of trying to heal out of it or something like that. Or you get full knowledge, you see that they have an answer, you discard that answer, you see what they draw, and if they didn't draw an answer, you still have now full knowledge, and you can just go for it again. So Regal's very good in Jhin. This is my favorite Exia element card. You can only this is one of the new like types of cards from Distorted Reflections. It's an exalted card. So even though this is a norm element, you actually can't play this until level 3. So this is why this is in the level 3 section of the video. Just like Rending Flames, you're never going to be able to kill someone with this before you hit level 3 because you don't have any weapons that can be brought out before then. You don't have any ways to pump damage. The only possible like synergy with this is your level 2 will get +1 attack. But that's only going to be dealing 8 damage, even if you are banishing 3. And you don't have enough like early allies and stuff to be able to kill even like a 15 health champion. So this is basically an Exit Element card as well as Regal. So these are some of our Exit Elements to start off with. And then we have 2 Hemorrhaging Rend. I've played 3 a lot. I just really wanted the space to only run 2. And this deck filters through so much that you're just gonna see this when you need it, basically. This is again another attack card if you don't have if your weapon got destroyed or you didn't have enough materializations to bring it out and you have to kill them really quick or something. This is just another really fantastic attack card. It gets through stealth, it gets through intercept, taunts, everything you want it to get through. It doesn't have that cleave unless you're damage 20 plus, so be careful of that. If you're trying to use this to board wipe, definitely pay attention to that. But you're usually only using this card when you're doing a really big lethal swing anyways, and so you're almost always going to be at damage 20 plus. Then we have Mend Flesh. So this is a really great recovery card. This is the best recovery card that exists in GA. It is a 2-cost slow, but if you're damage 25 plus, it costs 2 less to activate. So it can be a 0-cost recover 8. And frankly, you're almost never playing this when you're underneath 25 damage because with this deck, like I've said many times before, you want a lot of damage on your champion. And so you only want to be healing if you are scared that you're going to die before you hit to level 3, like from an aggro deck, or if you are already above your damage threshold. And the nice thing is that because this is free at that point, if you're damage 25 plus, that means that you're above your damage threshold. You're worried about dying in your end phase. And so it's really nice to like go for a kill, keep this in hand, and because it's 0 cost, like you can usually go for a kill and keep it and play it if your kill didn't work and heal out. Instead of being 2 cost and then like kind of having to decide, you know, am I going to have to spend my resources going for kill, my tempo going for kill, or should I play it more safe and stuff? You can kind of just do both because a 0 cost card is only going to cost you 1 card out of hand basically itself. And so it's just a fantastic card. I've been running 4 of very frequently in Jhin. Most Jhin lists do run 4 of, but again, kind of built this with value and like damage in mind. And so I didn't want to play like super long games with this deck. I want to try to go for a win earlier than later. And so I didn't want to run a ton of Mend Flesh. Plus we do have other recovery options in the deck already, like Fast Cure, and we have some in our sideboard as well. All right, let's talk Exeocite. So this card is a card that I, for a very long time, thought I overvalued in Jhin. Every Jhin list that I built, I always try to fit it in. But space is really hard, especially with Jhin. Jin's actually like oddly a hard deck to build. And the main reason why is because he has been tier 2 for a very long time. I think he's now a rogue tier 1.5 deck. And I'm kind of hoping that people don't know how to play against him very well at Boston, and that just kind of like skates me into day 2. But anyways, a little off topic there. But so Exeocite is a card that I don't see a lot of other Jhin players play, and I get why. It's very hard to fit into the deck. It can just feel a little bit more like a win more card and stuff, but specifically because of end caps, I think you need to run some count of Exeocites. I think if you ran 2 or 3, it wouldn't be bad, but I like how much this deck filters. You have creatives, Riles, cremations, Exeocites, hasties, fluffy shopkeeps. Like the amount of filtering that you do in this deck is crazy. And that's why we're on things like 2 Hemorrhaging Rend, 3 Mend Flesh. These cards that aren't generically good, like they are, but like you only need to see them in some situations. And because of how much filter that we have with the deck, I believe that you can run a lower count of those cards. Whereas I want to run a higher count of cards that are basically just always good no matter what and give you a better, like stronger turn. And so that's why I'm on for Exeocite. So again, I thought that I overvalued this card in Jhin for a really long time. No one else played him. no one else played Exeosites. You know, they kind of felt like a win more card to me and stuff. But then I started playing it without Exeosite, and I realized like, no, like this is actually enabling so many different things. It definitely actually does need to be in this deck. So 4 might be wrong. I'll tell you what, I'm not cutting that for Boston though. I'm going to be on 4 Exeosite for Boston. This card is insane. It really helps with the in-cap costs. So I kind of referred to that earlier. In-cap always costs 4 because we don't get the class bonus. But with Exeosite, you can reduce the cost of in-cap. And so instead of like when you have 4 cards in your hand and your opponent's like, how many cards in hand? And they're about to go like for a lethal line or something like that. You're like, oh, just 4. They're trying to think of all the counters that you might have. And they're like, okay, you could have like a null spell. I have enough cards to get out of a null spell. I'm good. And then they go for their play and you just go, okay, Exeosite, draw a card, next card is reduced by 1. I have 4 cards in hand. My in-cap now only costs 3, in-cap. And so it can just be really strong. Or more importantly, honestly, the more frequent use that you're using, because you don't care really if they damage you on their turn most of the time, is your lethal turns. So being able to go Enrage and then do your big swing, and then they try to do a Spell Shield, a Crystallized Destiny or something like that, and then you go, okay, Exeosite in-cap, because you didn't have enough cards to do it without the Exeosite. It enables you to go for lethal turns faster sometimes, and that can be really important because there are some games where, let's say you're playing against Onsol or something and you just weren't really able to stop them. They just like popped off, and then they did a pretty quick Onsol against you and got you way out of healing range. You know, you can't heal with just 1 Men Flesh or something. Having the Exeosites in your hand means that you can go for your crackback lethal turn faster, with less influence. And so that's like the main reason it's in here. It enables like interactions that they can't predict, like in caps when you only have 1 or 2 cards in hand. Sorry, 3 or 4 cards in hand or something. Or it enables your kill turns. And so that's mainly when you're going to use it. There's one really important interaction with Exeosite that I want to touch on, and it's if you play Exeosite and you're at 20 damage or higher, you would draw a card, and the next card you activate this turn costs 1 less to activate. So if you do Exeosite, you let it resolve, you draw your card, and then you do another Exeosite. This card was reduced. Even though it's already 0, this is now reduced by 1. It is eating up this Exeosite effect. So what you want to do if you have 2 Exeosite in hand, you want to say, I'm going to play an Exeosite. I'm holding priority. I'm going to play another Exeosite and then pass priority to them. They can decide how they want to respond and such. When these resolve, now you will resolve your first Exeosite, draw a card, and then resolve your next Exeosite, draw a card, and now your next card costs 2 less to activate because in between resolutions of these cards, you didn't play any new cards. So if you had multiple Exeosites in hand, you can do really, really cheeky in-cap plays or, you know, more Enrages and stuff. Like, it's just this card existing makes it incredibly hard for your opponent to know what your potential is on your turn because you might only have 5 cards in hand, but if you have double Exeosite, now all of a sudden you can do, you know, like double Enrages or like Enrage and an in-cap and things like that, right? I didn't run any of those numbers. I just use those as rough examples. So if that math's not right, don't blame me. But you get the point that I'm trying to say. It can just really enable some things that are incredibly hard to predict for your opponent. And then I think the last card that we have to talk about are these gorgeous Enrages. So these are store championship promos, I think. Beautiful cards, and very excited to be playing these this weekend. But yeah, this card is the bread and butter of Jhin. This is how you deal damage. Jhin's biggest problem has always been how to actually kill your opponent. And Enrage is just frankly the best option that you have. So this deck is built to be a Shuang-Ji Enrage deck. That is how you win 90% of your games. Sometimes you can win with like Enrage Rending, like I talked about earlier, or even Enrage Hemorrhaging Rend and stuff. But it's basically built to win that way. And that's why like 3 in-caps really necessary, because if they're trying to prevent the damage with like a Veiling Breeze or whatever, Crystallized Destiny, or if they're trying to fracturize or destroy your Regalia or something like that, you know, just it's so important to protect those pieces, and it's really important to have your Enrages actually go through. And so that's why like the premises of the deck is value a little bit of interaction, and then Enrage. That's essentially what this deck is. And it's got a fairly linear game plan. It can be a really, really weird deck to play. And so hopefully some of the interactions that I discussed in this video are beneficial to especially a new player that might have not played against Jhin or played Jhin. But yeah, so Enrage, I should briefly talk about this card too. So this is a 4-cost slow, but if you're damage 20 plus, this card costs 2 less to activate, which is pretty much the only time that you want to play this card. Most of the cards in Jhin that say damage 20 plus or damage 25 plus or whatever, you're pretty much only ever going to want to play them in those situations where you've met that damage threshold. So that's really nice. They don't really feel like a restriction, to be honest. They just kind of feel like a recommendation on when you should play the card, to be frank. So you can play this for 2 and deal 4 unpreventable damage to yourself. That's very, very important. Then the next attack this turn gets +1 power for every 4 damage counters on them. And so there's multiple important things to note with this. A, it's unpreventable damage, so your opponent can't prevent it. If you have a Blanch out, or, we don't run Safeguard Amulet, but if you did play Safeguard Amulet and you use that, it's still going to hit you. There is no way in the game currently at the time of recording this video that you can stop Enrage damage. So it's actually really nice though, because you don't really want your opponent to somehow stop that or something like that, or your own Blanch to like kind of stop that damage. Because you want to hit yourself for 4, because the next line of text is that you get +1 power every 4 damage counters on it. So just by playing this card, if you were technically at 0 damage, you wouldn't want to do that though. You would make your next attack do 1 more damage. But frequently you're going to be playing this when you're at like 30 plus damage, and so you can very, very easily get 7 or 8 damage from an Enrage and buff up your next attack pretty significantly. This essentially reads a 2-cost, your next damage deals 7 plus damage. That's a very, very, very good tempo play. It only works in Jhin, obviously, because it's Exia, but like, you're doing this self damage and stuff like that. Not a lot of decks would be wanting to hurt themselves to make their next attack stronger and everything. But so this will also usually get you more attack with your Regalia as well, because that gets +1 power for every 5 damage counters. So usually hitting yourself for 4 is going to reach the next threshold of 5 damage. Sometimes it won't, but usually it will. So Enrage is going to be making your next attack deal a lot more damage. It's important to note that it is giving that buff with a timestamp of when this card was resolved. So if you play Enrage and then play another Enrage afterwards, this first Enrage that already resolved will not get an additional power from you dealing 4 damage to yourself with the next Enrage. So what I would recommend is bringing out some dice or something, and when you play Enrage, say, okay, this one's giving me 7 additional attack, and then putting like this 7 out here and telling your opponent, I'm going to use this to represent that additional power. Is that okay with you? And then, putting the Enrage in your graveyard or wherever it goes when it resolves, and then now you have this like indication of what that did, instead of doing that and then like playing another one, like just getting the kind of messy board state. Yeah. So also another really good tip is if you have a QSG, I'll just bring out these cards. So let's say you have QSG Shuang, right? And apologies if I'm saying that incorrectly, but let's say you don't really have, like, you need to go for the kill. Your opponent hit you to 70 damage or something. There's no way you can heal out. You need to go for the win this turn. And you don't really have a lot of cards in hand maybe or something. A really nice thing that you can do is you can put 2 down. You can play Enrage and respond again. Hold that priority just like you did with the Exia site. Hold that priority, respond to the activation, pop your QSG, banish one of your cards that you just put down to put for Enrage. So this isn't costing you tempo that turn. You're getting rid of a resource that you don't have access to this turn. And then bring out this pole arm, deal 5 to yourself, draw a card. So you're now adding more resources to yourself this turn. And then you've already hit yourself for 5. Now this card is going to resolve. You're going to hit yourself for 4. And like I said, it timestamps at the time of resolution. So you are going to be adding in 1 more damage, maybe 2 if you get lucky, by the 5 damage that you dealt with Shuang. And so that's a really, really important line to remember for if you're going for a lethal turn with low resources. Play Enrage, hold priority, respond to the activation, pop QSG, bring out Shuang. draw a card, deal 5 damage, make your Enrage stronger, and just get this big OTK turn. This deck is mainly meant to OTK. You'll do a little bit of chip damage here and there with hasties, liminals, maybe even fluffies and stuff like that. But you usually won't deal much damage to them. You're usually going to get underneath like 5-ish damage during that way with the game. And then hopefully your opponent's just hitting you for a ton, or you're able to self-damage with Plate and Enrages and Shuangji. And you're going to go for this massive, 22 damage attack and stuff. It actually happens pretty often. I feel confident enough in this deck to bring it to Ascent Boston, mainly because I think it's probably going to be one of the only times that it's going to be an actual real contender for being a tier 1 deck, or as close to it as this deck can get. Let's briefly talk about the side deck. I know this is a long video. We wanted to make it long for you guys. We wanted to really explain some of these interactions and everything because Jin is such a unique and niche part of Grand Archive. And with this current meta, he actually might be coming into it at least as a rogue status. We've already seen, like I said, a 9th place list at a regionals, at a big regionals. So you should definitely start to understand what this champion does. And hopefully this video can give you insight into that. So we run 2 Reduce and 1 Spurn in the main. We also run 2 Reduce and 1 Spurn in the side. The thought process is when you're playing against a deck that Spurn's actually really good into, you can take out a Reduce for one of these, or side another card if you also still want your Reduces in that matchup. Or if you're against a deck that doesn't really care about Spurn as much, you want to cut your Spurn from the main and add in 1 more Reduce, and maybe add in another Reduce by cutting another card if that fast speed interaction removal is really important. Let's say maybe you're playing against Philo or something. You don't want them to hone on a sword weapon and Rending and kind of kill you before you get that immortal status. You can reduce their sword at fast speed after they do their Rending or their hone or whatever. So it's just relevant to have that fast speed interaction sometimes. And if you're against a deck that's playing Censor and the Spurn just doesn't matter, you just want that easy swap out. So it does feel a little weird to run 6 cards that are targeted towards Regalia removal, both in the main and side, but I think it makes sense for this tournament. Then we have 2 Blanche. It's really good. Really, really good in a lot of matchups. I have CSRs. I wanted to play them. That's pretty much it. It's just a good staple card. I think a lot of decks will be siding Blanche. Resolute Sand, it's really good. Again, like Jin is this kind of awkward deck where you have to be a little picky on to when you take damage. Less picky as to other decks, because other decks never want to take damage, but sometimes you just really need to make sure that you're going to survive before you get to level 3. And so Resolute Stand's fantastic for deck strategies like Suited and stuff like that that are like really filling up the board. And if you just Resolute Stand against them, you're basically just going to say, you can't kill me this turn. I'm going to buy myself 1 more turn to try to get to level 3. Once I get to level 3, it's a lot harder for you to kill me, and so this can just be a really good generic sideboard card. Then we have 2 Regenerate. This is a really nice card to just add in a little bit more healing into your deck. Basically it was just a card for when you're playing against aggro decks and you don't need, the Hemorrhaging Wrens because you're playing against Fire Aggro Goja that doesn't play any Taunters or Interceptors. You can just take out the Wrens, you can put in Regenerates. At worst, you can play it to draw a card in your memory and filter. And again, I already spoke to how much filter we have. Adding in even more filter from the side can be nice if you're in a matchup that you really want to see those fluffies, or you really want to see those dungeon guys to get to 3 and stuff like that, those aggro matchups. And the 2 cost and fast speed makes it very easy to do like a creative or a rile and then follow up with a Regenerate, even if you're not going to get that heal, just a filter. So I really like this card. I had it in the main over Fasters at one point, but I decided to move around some stuff and put the Regenerates into the side and just add the Fasters into the main by cutting down different counts of things. So I really do like this card though. And then obviously healing 2 if you are damage 10 plus can be really good as well. So if you are in one of those turns where you think you might have to do a lot of healing, you can do this like fast speed pre-rec, draw a card in memory, not really like lose anything from it, and then later on still try to like damage them and kill them, because healing 2 is probably not going to mess up your kill math that much. But then if it doesn't go through, if they survive somehow, now you have your Men Fleshes and your Fasters after that to try to keep healing out, and hopefully that 2 helped you. But it's mainly in here just to replace some of these slower cards against aggro to at the very least filter through and find better cards, or hopefully recover a little bit, because they will hit you to 10 plus pretty early on in the game. So very good sideboard card there. We have 1 more Rend. This is really important for any matchup that does have a very large amount of taunters and interceptors, like Onsol is running, stalwarts and fluffies. Tristan can redirect attacks, so being able to rend with like 7 damage, because this is already giving you 4. So if you rend with an Enrage or rend with your polearm weapon, you can just hit them and also kill their shadows, or maybe just kill them if you got enough damage. If they did like a big shadow strike on you and stuff, you just say, okay, rend, you can't redirect this because it's got cleave, so now I just win the game. So this is just really important, mainly against Tristan, but there are some other matchups that you're going to want to see one more copy. Like I said, I have ran 3 copies of Rend in my main for a long time, but the amount of filter that now exists in this deck, I don't believe I need 3 in the main, but I would like to have 3 in the side. Sorry, my 3rd copy in the side when it is really crucial in one matchup, especially because like Regal Inquisition is a thing right now and stuff. So you really don't want to run like low counts, because like I said, this is important against Tristan and stuff, which Tristan lists do sometimes run Regal. So you really don't want to run low counts of these cards that are crucial to your game plan and have them get Regal away, and now you just are trying to figure out how to win. So I think that one that is the first card that I added to the side deck. I would say that is the most uncuttable card from the side deck. Then we have 2 Blood Shroud Tempers. I've never been a big fan of this card, but water is at an all-time low right now, so I'm not as worried about Fracturize on that polearm. But like I said, this deck is very built around that polearm weapon and Enrages, and so we have one pretty linear game plan, and so I wanted Blood Shroud Tempers for when we are playing against decks that have more answers for that. So this will give a weapon Omni Shroud, and that means that it's basically can't be targeted by anything. And so it's really good for if your opponent has Baby Greens or Fracturizes or Shatter the Brittle or Excalibur in Luxem. Like there's a lot of cards that are in meta decks. Baby Green not as much, but the other cards are all definitely being played in meta decks, and there's a good chance that you run into them. I wanted a way to help with that more, but there's another way that we can deal with that, and some of them are in caps, right? You can't do that on Baby Green, but the other ones you can. But another way to deal with that is our last card, which is Regal Inquisition. I'm going to spend a while talking about this, so buckle in. This is, again, I already talked about a little bit in the main deck. You can use it to kind of like check your opponent and see, can I just go for a win? Like instead of trying to go for a win while holding up in cap if they have a card to interact, this is a cheaper way to do that because it only costs 2, and you can preemptively do it. So if you go for it and you saw, oh, you had 3 in caps for my Enrages, let's just get rid of all of them. I mean, that probably won't happen unless you Spellword Sceptered because they're going to in cap the Regal. But you can see, oh, you had 2 Crystallized Destiny. That's a good one, a good example. So even if I had done Enrage in cap, I wouldn't have gotten through. So this is just a really good way to check for a lethal line. But more importantly as well, it can get rid of Fracturizes, Excaliburs, all these answers to your weapon, because you really want those to stay around. Spurn Dash, if you have a fire opponent that's playing that. It can also get rid of Regals, which is pretty important. If you DG up to level 3, playing Regal right away, maybe getting rid of their Dungeon Guides or Heavenly Guides or whatever they might have if they're still on level 2, getting rid of their Regals, getting rid of their 3rd element cards, it can be just really, really strong. There is a little bit of an element of a control deck with this because of the nature of immortality. And so being able to control what your opponent is able to cast is really strong. And this card gets exponentially better the more you run, because it means that you're going to be able to, again, get in those situations where you DG'd up, you got to level 3 first, so you can do the first Regal, and being able to especially get rid of your opponent's Regals are just insane in that position. And so it's good to run 4 of for when you are in those matchups that it's good in, because you're going to find it faster. But another important reason to run 4 of is because you will find yourself in these Regal battles sometimes where your opponent does Regal Inquisition you. They get rid of one of your Regals, one of your Enrages, maybe like a Hemorrhaging Rend if they're Tristan or something like that, right? And they're getting rid of 3 cards from your hand that are all really good and really important. But if they do that, they're going to draw you 3 new cards. And so having multiple copies is going to help you come back and say, okay, well, now I'm going to Regal you. I'm going to slow you down as well and kind of get to that same pace. But more importantly, if you do Regal, let's say like a Luxem player, for example, there's a lot of cards that you might want to discard out of a Luxem player's hand. Luxem sites aren't as important because you're mainly one-shotting them. But Lightweaver's Assault, Excaliburs, even Uncover the Plot, not really, but Lightweaver's Assault, Excaliburs, their Regals themselves, in caps. There's a lot of cards, Gleaming Cuts. I don't know if I mentioned that. There's a ton of cards that you might want to hit out of a Luxem player's hand. And Luxem is a harder matchup. And so I'm on 4 Regals total throughout the main and side because I want to bring in 4 Regals against a deck like Fire Luxem and be able to say, okay, I'm going to Regal Inquisition you. I'm going to get rid of 2 Lightweaver's Assaults, a Gleaming Cut, and Excalibur, which is great. But then I'm letting you draw 4 cards. And the beauty about this card is that you get to see what cards they draw. So if I get rid of 4 of their cards and then they just draw into 2 more Lightweavers and I'm like, oh no, you know, like you're going to eventually kill me in my end step, I can just follow it up with another Regal if I have it. So playing one of these and having another one in hand to follow up with, if you discard a heavy amount of cards from their hand or memory and let them draw a ton of cards, it'll just let you instantly do that second Regal. Just be like, okay, all those cards that you just drew, you know, I see that you got an Excalibur to kill my polearm. I'm gonna play my Regal just to get rid of that Excalibur, because now you're only drawing 1 card, maybe 2 cards or something. So now the second Regal that you're doing, you're giving them less card draw, and so it's less likely that they're gonna draw into another good thing, especially since now you've gotten rid of twice some of their best cards in their deck, so they have less good cards in their deck to draw, if that makes sense, right? And so it can just be really good to do a double Regal Inquisition in 1 turn, and that's why I'm on 4 of them. It's a card that's brand new, so there's still definitely things that even myself am learning with this card, but I found myself wanting multiple Regals. You know, I was testing against Terry for Boston, and I had a Regal, he had a Regal. And he was able to play his first. He Regaled me, got rid of my Regal, got rid of an Enrage, and I was like, man, that sucks. I drew 2, but one of them wasn't a Regal, and he saw that I drew a Regal. And I was like, okay, good. Like, he was playing Luxem. I was like, okay, I'm good now. Now I can Regal him back. And that's when he played the second Regal against me and only got rid of that Regal. And since I was only drawing 1 card, I drew like a Ryle or something like pretty unimportant at that point. And it just like felt really, really bad. So that was like kind of the moment that snapped for me. Oh, playing 4 of these is really good. It lets you see them earlier. It lets you chain multiple of them back to back if you need to. That's the beauty of it. If you do your first one and they draw a bunch of dead cards, because you'll know, you don't need to play the second one and lose a card from hand. So it's just like such an incredibly strong card in specific situations. There's a reason I did start with 2 or 3 of in the main deck. There's a reason that I started cutting them and cutting them and cutting them and putting them in side deck. Again, I think it probably would be correct to play the 4th one in the side instead of in the main. That might be a change that I make for Boston. I'm not sure. But yeah. Anyways, I know, guys, that this was a really long video, but like I said earlier, hopefully it really helped you guys explain a lot of the choices that I made for Boston and a lot of the choices to make in Jin, whether you're playing against it or playing it itself. So hopefully this was a super informative video. Like I said, if you enjoy these kind of deep dives into decks, definitely make sure to go check out our Patreon. The link will be in the description below. We do these kind of content on there a lot more frequently than we do on YouTube to give you guys a good competitive edge. So we'll see you on the next one. Peace.